It was a knock at night, one small, frantic rap against a neighbor's door. A child, barefoot and trembling, asking for water. What arrived at that doorstep was not the smiling image the internet had known for years. The boy's ankles bore the marks of being bound. His legs were thin. His voice was hollow with exhaustion. That knock would tear the veil from a family's polished feed and set off one of the most unsettling influencer scandals of a generation. Please help this channel grow, like the video, try the new hype feature, leave a comment and subscribe for more stories. This helps us a lot. Thank you. When officers followed that knock to one home and then another, they found children in closets, boys who had fled through windows, and evidence suggesting that discipline once framed as guidance had become something far more sinister. The smiles in the old videos began to look like masks. This is the story of Ruby Franke, her meteoric rise as a parenting influencer, and the fall that followed when reality forced its way into the open. Ruby Franke was, for many viewers, the friendly voice of parenting. As the creator behind the YouTube channel 8 Passengers, she documented the everyday life of her large family, birthday celebrations, school mornings, chore charts, and long lists of rules meant to shape behavior. Her camera was steady, her smile practiced, and her advice frank, often uncomfortably candid for viewers who expected the gentle gloss of influencer culture. Millions clicked play, and over time, her brand grew into a platform offering parenting courses, coaching, and the kind of authority that turns followers into disciples. Her content was marketed as practical tough love, structure, confession, repentance. For some, the blunt approach was liberating. For others, it was a red flag. But what Ruby sold was trust, trust that she had answers, trust that she could shape children into obedient, moral beings. It's worth noting how quickly trust can become influence, and how influence can be monetized, especially when a figure presents themselves as both parent and expert. Behind the camera, Ruby lived a complicated life. She had 6 children, a marriage that would fray as the case unfolded, and friendships and partnerships that would later be scrutinized by investigators and the public alike. To millions, she was a living manual for modern parenting. To a few, she was a controversial figure who used shame, strict discipline, and public confession as tools. To investigators, after the knock on that neighbor's door, she would become a defendant accused of grievous harm. The 8 Passengers channel started as many family vlogs do, small, intimate, oddly addictive. Viewers watched life unfold in short increments, a child's tea party, a mom's morning routine, weekend recitals. The formula was simple and effective: authenticity, relatability, and intimacy. Ruby's direct address to camera today, "We're doing X," created a feeling of being invited inside a home. Content creation turned into a business. Advertising, sponsorships, and courses expanded the reach. Ruby's blunt parenting philosophy, strict boundaries, confession exercises, public accountability resonated with an audience hungry for clarity in their chaotic parenting lives. She became a brand, a woman who offered not just glimpses into family life but a roadmap for fixing misbehavior. Critics and fans debated the philosophy, but engagement grew, and so did Ruby's perceived expertise. And with that growth came a network of people who reinforced her approach. Partnerships deepened, including one with a counselor who offered programs and courses that promised behavioral transformation. In the best-case scenario, such partnerships are checks and balances; in the worst case, they amplify methods that go unchecked. For Ruby, those partnerships would become entangled with her parenting choices with devastating consequences. Even as 8 Passengers boomed, critics were vocal. Viewers and fellow parents flagged harsh punishments in videos, isolation tactics, public shaming, and strategies that seemed designed to humiliate rather than educate. Comments ranged from concerned to outraged. Some viewers reported what they saw to child protective agencies. Others dug into older videos and found a pattern of increasing severity in discipline. Threads and comment sections can be noisy and unreliable, but when many independent viewers raise the same concerns and when those concerns include images of frightened children or questionable therapeutic tactics, the online chorus becomes impossible to ignore. For years, these concerns simmered below the surface of viral success. They were warnings that, in retrospect, would be read as a prelude. What the cameras didn't show was the private life, off-camera counseling sessions, the instructions given by outside advisors, and the dynamics inside the family when the cameras were off. Over time, former clients and insiders would describe a pattern, a philosophy that prized confession and correction above a child's safety and autonomy. These testimonies pieced together with evidence gathered later would form a darker picture than any thumbnail could capture. Then came the night that cracked everything open. A child later identified in reports as one of Ruby's sons escaped through a window. He walked, barefoot and with injuries, until he reached a neighbor's house. The neighbor opened the door to a thin, frightened boy asking for food and water. What they saw triggered a call to emergency services. That single act of flight, a child choosing to leave and seek help, would become the most pivotal moment in this case. First responders responded. Officers reached the property and began to piece together a disturbing scene. One child was found outside, another child was discovered inside a dark closet in a different home connected to the counselor and the family. Medical professionals reported malnourishment, visible wounds consistent with restraints, and psychological trauma. The video and bodycam footage released later, raw, unedited, uncomfortably human, showed a paramedic moved to tears outside the house and officers struggling to coax a child from hiding. For many, the footage was confirmation that what some viewers had long suspected was true: behind curated thumbnails and staged smiles, children had been harmed. Social media that once boosted Ruby's message now amplified the images that condemned it. The escape was both an act of survival and a beacon of accountability, a child's desperate refusal to remain in an environment he believed dangerous. Once law enforcement secured the scene, they moved with methodical urgency. Search warrants were executed. Law enforcement teams collected evidence, electronics, journals, home surveillance footage, and items that suggested a pattern of restriction and control. The material recovered would become integral to both criminal charges and the public record. Among the evidence were home videos and surveillance that captured the children's conditions and movements. Officers discovered medical neglect, bindings consistent with restraints, and signs that the children had been forced to carry out labor without proper care. Investigators documented interviews, medical examinations, and witness statements, each piece building toward a larger portrait of alleged sustained abuse. Investigators also traced the ties between Ruby and her counseling partner. The counselor, a professional who had offered parenting courses and mentorship programs, had been advising the family and, according to later filings and admissions, participated in or condoned methods applied to the children. The convergence of advice, influence, and action was central to investigators' theory that an ideology of discipline, amplified by counseling, had crossed the line into criminal conduct. In the weeks after the escape and investigation, charges were filed. Both Ruby Franke and her business partner and counselor were arrested late in August 2023 and faced multiple felony counts of aggravated child abuse. The criminal complaints described numerous acts: binding children with restraints, withholding food and water, forcing barefoot labor in extreme heat, and practices intended to humiliate and subjugate. These were not isolated incidents alleged to have occurred once, they were described as patterns of conduct over time. The prosecution framed the case as one not only about physical harm, but about psychological coercion and the weaponization of religious or moral rhetoric to justify severe punishments. Witnesses and former clients described practices that encouraged absolute compliance, public confession, and isolation from critics. The attorney's filings argued that the abuse was intentional and orchestrated, designed to dominate and reshape the children's behavior through fear. Legal teams prepared for trial, but the case ultimately took a different path. Plea negotiations began, balancing victims' trauma against the value of admitting guilt and avoiding a painful trial. For survivors, the path through court would be a difficult negotiation between seeking truth in open testimony and preventing further harm from public reliving of trauma. In December 2023, both women entered guilty pleas to multiple counts of aggravated child abuse. Ruby Franke pleaded guilty to 4 counts, her business partner entered similar pleas. In court documents and statements, Ruby acknowledged that she had followed dangerous counsel and had participated in actions that harmed her children, calling the choices a descent into what she described as a destructive delusion. The pleas were an admission that spared victims the ordeal of a public trial, but they also cemented legal accountability. On February 20, 2024, a judge sentenced both women to consecutive terms that created a potential maximum exposure under Utah law of up to 30 years in prison. The sentence structure, multiple consecutive terms of 1 to 15 years each, meant that, while the theoretical maximum could be far greater, Utah's sentencing rules capped actual time served at 30 years. The penalties reflected the gravity of the crimes, the vulnerability of the victims, and the court's intent to protect children from similar abuses. In court, there were tears, pleas for forgiveness, and stinging statements from prosecutors, advocates, and family members. Ruby's public persona, the confident instructor in a lovingly lit kitchen, was replaced with a defendant acknowledging harm. For the families involved, the sentencing was not a closure but a legal milestone in a longer, painful recovery. It was also a public reckoning, the influencer era's collision with accountability. When scandal goes viral, communities coalesce quickly and sometimes dangerously. In the days and months after the arrest, online spaces populated by journalists, armchair detectives, and concerned citizens erupted with commentary. Threads sifted through public videos, debated interpretations, and compiled timelines. Some users acted as digital investigators, cataloging uploads, saving deleted clips, and searching business records. Others cautioned against speculation without evidence. There were countless theories, about the role of the counselor, about how courses and coaching may have altered family dynamics, about whether the children's exposure on camera contributed to harm. Some speculation was grounded in documents and footage later released by authorities. Other claims were less substantiated, spreading through rumor and the hunger for a neat narrative. This kind of crowdsourced inquiry has 2 faces. One face helped hold power to account, archiving material that could vanish, amplifying survivors' stories, and pressuring institutions to respond. The other face risked muddying the public record, circulating unverified claims that could re-traumatize victims or misdirect attention from established evidence. For investigators and journalists, the challenge became separating substantiated facts from the noise of viral speculation. There are many ways to frame this story. It is a criminal case, a family tragedy, a cautionary tale about influence. But perhaps the clearest lesson is this: public trust is fragile. When celebrity, commerce, advice, and faith merge without transparency or accountability, the consequences can be catastrophic for the people who are most vulnerable. This case forces us to ask uncomfortable questions. How do we protect children who appear in monetized content? What responsibilities do platforms have when their creators offer prescriptive advice to millions? How can communities spot warning signs before harm becomes irreversible? Utah's legislature responded with new protections aimed at the children of content creators, a legal ripple reflecting broader cultural unease about children being both audience and commodity. But laws and policies are only part of the solution. Prevention requires vigilance, neighbors who notice odd behavior and act, professionals who question harmful practices and report them, platforms that prioritize child safety over engagement, and viewers who recognize that a polished feed does not guarantee a safe home. This is the story of a woman who rose to influence millions and fell under the weight of actions that harmed her children. It is also the story of those children, their bravery, their suffering, their escape. The knock at the neighbor's door was an act of courage. It was the moment when a child's plea for help cut through an online fantasy and reached the reality we are now left to reckon with. If you finished this video, consider this: compassion is not just feeling, it is doing. If you see something that doesn't sit right in a friend's family, on a channel you watch, or on the street outside your home, trust that small instincts matter. One knock can change everything.